Welcome back, everybody. Another episode 136 of the MNCAA podcast. This is the Golden Gophers segment, That Gopher Hockey Puckcast. I'm Drew Cove, joined as always by um, the incomparable Nate Wells. That's what I should say. At Gopher State on Twitter. Not as active lately, but yes, at Gopher State, one of the best handles there is. And certainly a celebration of hockey in the Gopher State this weekend, but for its I guess for the satellite location of the Gopher State in East Lansing did not end well. One of 6 points the Gophers received this past weekend in absolute blowout loss, 9-3 on Friday. And Saturday, it ended officially in a 3-3 tie, but it went to a shootout, so you guys can guess what happened. And yeah, it just was not the weekend a lot of people were expecting for a Gophers team that faced Michigan State very shorthanded last time around, and a team that had been obviously pressing all year to in being very successful. And they ran into a Michigan State team that uh, made them look not so very good. So Nate, what do you make of? Let's just jump into Friday. You wrote down on our notes. Is it time? Was that the kick the trash can moment, or is that just let's throw this tape into the ether and never speak or remember or hear of it again?
Well, I mean, Hockey Day Minnesota was out of Valley Fair this year, and this weekend was just quite the roller coaster. Not much of a wild thing, but for me, this Friday game is I've been having that one in my back pocket.
Oh yeah,
all week. This Friday game is for me. I think it's kick the trash can. You only get a couple of those a year. The Gophers have been fortunate enough to not need and to use them any of the time, but as much as burning the tape and just not speaking of this game again, I think this one is more important than the Ohio State loss from a couple weeks ago. You see some of the same characteristics. The Gophers were in a game. They let it go away from them in the second half of it. They gave up 7 goals in the last 30 plus minutes. And this is twice in 3 weeks against 2 NCAA tournament teams. And to me, that is either something that, in a couple months, we're either speaking of, hey, this is the identity of the Gophers, the best teams in the nation kind of figure it out and they can withstand their punches and counter and then finally be able to put them down. Or it's going to be the origin story of Minnesota figured it out and they got their stuff together. And hey, the foundation that's built on this before, they're able to overcome. They're able to take down the Michigan States, the Boston Colleges, the Maines and Denvers of the world.
yeah. And when nothing more fitting than something that we've talked about. I mean, I feel like we've talked about almost every podcast the last few years and how good the Gophers are at retaking the momentum and just kind of against most teams. And remember, most teams that the second they're down or tied, they find a way to make it, like, to just take it back and say, you know what, you're not going to do that to us. And they just kind of impose their will and all their talent coming together to make that happen. But Nate, it doesn't typically happen against them, and it happened against the Gophers on Friday. Just retaking the lead in just such a short span after it being tied a couple times, 1-1, 2-2, and Michigan State just took control and said, you know what, you usually think you're the better team, Minnesota, but they certainly made their case to show, obviously, in the points that they got in the Big Ten too, but best team in the conference. And after watching Michigan State the last few weeks and including this weekend, it's hard to say that they're not the number one team in the whole country. So it just is interesting to see that happened against the Gophers, Nate, just especially when it's been their identity for so many years in this turnaround that Bob Motzko has been a part of, to be just a team that has the talent and the structure to impose that will.
Yeah, we have to give a lot of credit to Michigan State. We'll give them their flowers. We had the last series in Minneapolis, we were wondering how much of it was that the Gophers were shorthanded and they ran out of gas. And you cannot say that is the case this time around, where, Minnesota, healthy, brings their full roster, changes up some of the personnel on Saturday after getting routed out of the building on Friday night in a way that it's been a long time. We have to go back to maybe Motzko's first or second year to think of one of those losses. It's it's certainly it's been a while since they've had one of those type of whooping losses.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right. Where for as resilient as Minnesota has been this season and the past few, where it's been their calling card, the Spartans did to the Gophers what the Gophers do to a lot of teams, where Minnesota worked hard to get opportunities and score, and then within less than 2 minutes, Michigan State retakes the lead. Same thing happens, rinse, repeat on Friday. Michigan State retakes the lead, gets a little bit more momentum, starts to put their foot on the gas. Game's over. Saturday night, same thing. The largest one of those times where Michigan State retook the lead after Minnesota scored was 4 minutes and 7 seconds. So pretty much you're looking for being able to just rebound and take control of the game once again, which the Spartans did to the Gophers. We were wondering what we were going to find out about Minnesota this weekend. And if it was, they are one of the top teams in the nation and that they can play their style against the top teams in the nation after a non-conference schedule that was certainly not the toughest. And they've had highs and lows throughout some of the Big Ten schedules. And, Michigan State looked a lot like what we were looking to see from Minnesota this weekend.
Yeah. And it's just, Nate, let's talk about that a little more too, because I want to jump into some of the offensive stuff and just kind of go not game by game, but just kind of look at these two games as a whole and see just what did go wrong for Minnesota. Obviously, that their propensity to come back from a deficit or a tie to kind of establish that, we're here too, and we're gonna make sure you guys go quietly into the night didn't happen. But I just want to focus too on Friday night. Both goalies played. Both goalies gave up a lot of goals, and it wasn't so lopsided one way. It looked like Airy gave up 5, and then it looked like Soulier might come in and establish something, but no, he gave up 4 too, and in just a bunch of in a very flurry sequence to end the game, which I was kind of looking at the reaction. I was at Hockey Day Minnesota after the Gopher alumni game was being played, and kind of everyone filed into the tent as Michigan State just poured on the offense in that third period, and watching a lot of Gopher alumni greats kind of watch that on the big screen behind them as the game was over was an interesting.
You had the better Gopher game on Friday night covering.
Yeah, they did. They lost. Yeah, the Gopher game. The Gopher alumni lost 8-4, but it was still not. It definitely was a more fun game, I should say, to have been a part of. But it was very interesting to watch that reaction at the end. But Nate, the shots itself. 42-30 Friday, 38-21 on Saturday. It was good that the Gophers were able to get some more goals on less shots and stay in the game on Saturday, but it just looked like Michigan State they had kept them quiet. They had kept all of Minnesota's big guns quiet, and for a team that has had struggles on the penalty kill, has had struggles on the power play at times, even on Friday night especially. Is that kind of something that is that just, again, it's kind of talking about do we learn more about Minnesota or Michigan State? I think we learned something about both of them from that standpoint. Is Minnesota are they able to do that just against basically 63 or 62 of the other 64 teams and just one that they're not? Or is it more just about Minnesota's Michigan State's really ability to say we can clamp down defensively and prevent you from looking like yourselves?
It's a little bit of both on there, where Michigan State has the talent and they have the ability to take advantage of some of Minnesota's struggles, where they're able to they neutralize the Gophers' depth, which is not an easy task to do, and they did it in a way that we have not seen any team pull off this season. They have a defense that is able to shut down some of the stars. Jimmy Snuggerud had a fantastic Saturday with a couple goals, but it really kind of speaks to Minnesota's strength, where I thought their second period was just a bit of a struggle. And all of a sudden I look up, I'm like, oh yeah, they have 3 goals in that period. It's a 3-3 game. They're still in it. It's tough to count the Gophers out. And just, the Michigan State's top players played like top players. And They took advantage of the Gophers on the faceoff dot. They got puck possession. When we've seen the Gophers kind of struggle, it's they weren't able to get quality shots. They didn't do, and this time around, like even kind of seen the last couple of weeks where the Gophers, their penalty kill and just not being able to win face-offs, and like they really were struggling with face-offs at times. There were a couple times where I'm looking, I need to like go back to the stats, and I'm like, I was looking like Eric Paulson or someone was like 1 of 11 or something, like at like one point.
Missing
like
Jackson
Saturday.
Nelson this year.
They missed. Yeah, Jackson Nelson. Jackson Nelson's ghost is probably like second in face-off wins at this point for the Gophers this year. Like it's a struggle, and especially when you are trying to control and get possession from in a game where you're being outshot, you're being outchanced. Starting without the puck is the last thing that you want. So Michigan State has the ability to do that, and there's some things that Minnesota can clean up and has to clean up as they look to make a run down the stretch of both their Big Ten regular season and then the postseason.
I mean, and you hit the nail on the head, Nate, with possession. It's just on Saturday, especially, just like one of the goals, it was just a clear face-off win, a little bit of a pivot from the point, and just a shot that was ripped. And honestly, I mean, Soulier led in 3 in that game, but seeing every shot, it was all like bar down, and some of them like clanked off the side. It's like there's only so much net that, I mean, to cover, like he's making the shot, he's making the saves that he needs to, but like sometimes, and you obviously want your goaltender to make a few of those otherworldly saves, but when you're screened 3 times or like with 3 different guys in front and they still go bar down, it's like it's tough to make those saves. And even just like there was another thing besides faceoffs is possession in the defensive zone. There was a sequence, I think, for the third goal, was just a failed clear up the middle of the ice. It was kind of just a sort of fanned on pass out of the zone, gets to the defender, he shoots it back in, Snuggerud tries to knock it back out, and then they come back around, just grab possession of it again and just rip it past. I mean, they gave us so many different chances against the Gophers to get that goal, and it's like those few things that are just you can't afford to continue to make those mistakes so often against a team like that. And it's just it was interesting to see, because you just say, man, Minnesota had not had the propensity to do that against most of the teams they've played this year. But I know that kind of gets ahead of our maybe discussion about kind of just the overall things we learned from this game, this series. But just those few key elements of the game was just really what just absolutely sank them in the end.
Yeah, it's the top teams will make you pay for your mistakes. And Michigan State is a top team. Mm-hmm. And when the Gophers had opportunities and they weren't able to convert them, or they weren't able to clear a puck out of the zone, when they're at their best, they were eliminating mistakes and they were creating chances of their own. But just, the Spartans, they made the Gophers pay at the end of the day. I agree with you on Saturday. I'm like, I didn't think Soulier had a bad game. He gave 3 goals.
No.
Like, they're all great goals. Mm-hmm. Friday, neither goalie looked great.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice at some point just to see one of them kind of step up. And we keep waiting week in, week out. And I mean, we're about to hit February.
It's almost February, Nate.
It's almost February. And this is the time of year where you're kind of waiting to see what's going on. I've always wondered, I kind of was really curious to see what would happen on Saturday, whether, especially with how Soulier didn't play great either, if Moscow would go back to Erie, mm-hmm. or if he was just going to continue the tandem. But at a certain point, we're waiting for one to step up.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, I feel like with the weekends coming up, I mean, keep it a tandem, but like give one guy 2 games and then give the next guy, like, just predetermine right now, like, all right, you're giving Erie Wisconsin series, and the next series just give to Soulier. I just need to see a few games in a row of these guys, because mm-hmm. And obviously, like, he's put in, like, just like he says, like, he's putting the goalie in, but he's making the decision who to start, but he's not saying who the number 1 is. It's just they need to determine that based on their play. And I think at times hearing Bob Motzko after even the Mercyhurst series talking about, our defenders were playing really well offensively, but sometimes the defensive side of their game was a little bit lacking. And I mean, how much of that is, I mean, in the grand scheme of a few different weeks, how much is that of that, those failings from the goals against, how much is that on defensive structure overall versus just the goaltenders making the saves? And we saw definitely a tale of two different nights on Friday and Saturday, because like you said, I think Soulier had a good game, and I'd love to see him play a few games in a row, because just to see if any of those guys because right now, it's just, you're right. Nobody's taking it up, and nobody's taking the mantle and saying, "Hey, I'm the guy." But I feel like maybe try it. Like, obviously I'm not the coach, but you just got to try something else to see who can grab the reins. And maybe 2 games in a row is that type of thing to say, all right, maybe Area has 2 really good games against Wisconsin. Maybe Soulier has 2 really good games against Wisconsin. Or what do you know? Maybe one looks really bad against a certain team that they play, and you need to figure out who that guy is, because like you said, February, we're getting very close to the time where having a tandem isn't a good thing anymore. Having 2 good goaltenders is not a good thing anymore once you get to one and done. And I'm not worried, because I don't think the goaltenders are, I don't think it's like, wow, both these goalies stink. Like, that's not the case. Not the case at all. It's just when the offense can't put it together. Do you have a guy like Augustine who can steal a couple every season, and steal more than a couple in his case? But obviously, it's concerning on that end. And obviously, I don't think it was just the goalies. I think it's a part of Michigan State and Minnesota not playing as well as they could have, overall, on the other skaters in the lineup. But it is interesting to see, and it'll be. I'm waiting. I'm more eager now to see one of those guys jump up and to take the reins.
I want to see at some point, if it's Airy on Friday, play them both.
Yeah.
If you play Soulier on Friday and hey, if you play great, we'll put you Saturday too, or you flip flop on the other side, or hey, if Soulier if you still do Friday, Saturday, and Soulier has a great game on Saturday, be like, all right, we'll put you on Friday. Just have that opportunity. You did touch on something there with the defense, just maybe the structure, and especially as once they're kind of trailing and getting out of there, where it's really easy for the other team to kind of just create better chances and kind of just hang out the goalie out to dry. And I do wonder how much of that is kind of played a role in that the third period of Friday's game.
Yeah, third period Friday, it didn't look like there was certainly an offensive push that left a few odd man rushes and a few chances against. It's funny watching Friday. There was a few in the alumni game I was watching too at Hockey Day. It was some of the guys pressing up and being down a few goals, and Eric Shearhorn was left out to make the splits a couple of times. He made one poke check save, but it was
it's all time, so you gotta go out and dive.
Exactly, but it was somewhat similar watching, because it looked like there was a lot of chances against that. Soulier just didn't have a good chance Friday, but. Not to talk about each game individually now, Nate. We've already kind of jumped into our overall section as well. Let's just jump into the big question: Is this the Gophers' identity? Is this team just one that is great against 95% of college hockey, but then there's just one or two teams that are just better than them? Is Michigan State just a team that is this just I'm trying to formulate the thought, but is Minnesota just in that at the top of that second tier, and Michigan State is team of destiny this year? Is that what this Gophers team is? Just kind of wrong time to have a really good team, but not. I mean, I think they're a great team too, but I think Michigan State just they have a description that is hard to. I mean, it's better than great. This Michigan State team looks absolutely complete. And that's not to say we'll talk about Michigan later. I don't know what to make of any team that plays against Michigan ever, because they're so up and down. But to me, Michigan State, they just seem like a tier above. And that's not to say Minnesota isn't near the very top, but it's hard to say. Is this just what Minnesota is right now? Is a team that can beat 95% of the league, but can just have their new shortcomings exposed by a team like Michigan State?
I wonder how much of this also comes across being Minnesota and just having watched the Vikings, where you kind of had that feeling of they dominate the competition below them. They're finding ways to win games, and then when they play the Lions or the Rams, they struggle and they look totally out of place, and you feel like maybe they're a bit of a fraud. And I have that kind of, maybe that's just in the back of my mind, where I don't think that's still this Gopher team. I know it was. You can't. I know they dominated their non-conference, and they, despite playing teams that they should have beat, and they did beat. For me, I feel like we're going to learn a lot about what these last 3 weeks mean, where the Gophers probably had as many great periods. They had as many great periods as horrible periods. They had 2 really great ones. They had 2 ones that you want to like just actually burn the tape on those 2.
Yeah.
And both of them happening, letting games get out of hand, to me is the big no. And you want to see Minnesota learn and find ways to limit those losses against those top teams and kind of keep staying in games, which we've seen for much of the season. When they don't play their A game, they're still able to find ways to be in games and win many of them.
Yeah.
But the same time, this last 3 weeks, where is this just the point where, all teams struggle during stretches, and this is our lessons Gophers have to learn. Some teams learn them earlier than others, and we want to see Minnesota learn how to play against teams that have a little bit more talent and also have a bit of the styles that are challenging to them. Need to learn how to improve, gain more puck possession, be better on face-offs, support the defense, limit whether it's an opportunity to, hey, the depth has worked really well for a certain point. Do we try to make a couple all-star lines against some of these top teams? How do we get a little bit more Oliver Moore or Matthew Wood, which looked good at times? How to get anyone, but it's not Jimmy Snuggerud to kind of raise their game as well.
He's been the guy keeping in a lot of games.
Jimmy Snuggerud, 2 goals on Saturday, and we're just like, yeah, 2 goals on Saturday. That's just what you expect from Jimmy Snuggerud at this point.
Exactly.
And he's doing what you'd hope that Jimmy
just
Snuggerud
enough
would
to
do.
keep the team in it, to keep the team there and let somebody, maybe even including himself, step up in the moment to take a lead or something like that. I think he's been Minnesota's all-star for sure. Minnesota's MVP.
Easy. I mean, Hobie Baker's stuff came out this week where, it's the fan vote where pretty much all the teams just nominate players, but I would be shocked to not see him in the top 10.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the top 3. He's been that important to Minnesota. At the same time, though, with the Gophers, I don't worry about the shootouts. That's just, at this point, we're just laughing about it. Once the game ends, you're like, okay, it just stinks. They're going to lose a point. They can't figure out a shootout to save their lives. It's funny at this point, but I will just we didn't get the cheer and go crazy for them actually to score a goal. We had that for another one. But you did see a bit more in the Saturday game where you knew they were going to fight back. You knew there were going to be a better performance. And to me, kind of getting that the middle stat, that power play goal at the end of the second was huge, where they didn't get too many grade A chances or big opportunities. Michigan State played a fantastic game on Saturday, but they made the most of that chance and they got the goal. And even during the third period, you're like, okay, they're still in this game. I could see it going either way, which was really just a fun matchup between 2 of the top teams in the country. But you see the grid from the Gophers. You see where they can improve. We did learn a lot about Minnesota this weekend. I think that is the big takeaway, where there's certainly the last 2 weeks were more of lessons that the Gophers need to learn and kind of figure out, hey, how can they improve? They are a good team. They're bordering on a great team, but when you're reaching into postseason and you playing the one and dones, you can't let games slip away. You can't be on the other end of giving out goals right after scoring one. And just, there are certainly things where we're going to look back and look at these last 3 weeks and be like, was this Minnesota's identity against top teams, or is this just something that they learned from?
And exactly. And it's good that Minnesota learned these things about themselves. And I think they've learned it at various times throughout the season, because even when the first half of the season, there was 4 losses and 2 of them were just we got goalied basically. I think they can say, all right, there wasn't a ton of mistakes glaring that they could say, all right, here's where we learn. But better to have them now when you still have games to play and position to establish, rather than the one and done, to say, oh wow, if only they would have known that they needed to be better at doing face-offs and turnovers in your own zone and clears and things like that. It seems like rudimentary stuff, but It's just a matter of doing it against the best teams. And it's good that they play in a conference that's tough enough to help them learn those lessons against a bunch of teams that will be making the tournament. But Nate, that is to say that we've been nitpicking Minnesota's shortcomings for the last 25 minutes or so. And which I think we do need to do when we kind of gas the team up most of the season, because they have been playing well enough to talk about them. But especially when things don't go right, it's important that we talk about why, because there hasn't been a lot of opportunities to notice that type of thing throughout the season so far. So that is to say that after nitpicking for 25 minutes about this team's shortcomings in a weekend against one of the top teams in the country, they're still third in the pairwise.
Yes.
They're still a top 4 team. So losing at Michigan State against a team that's better than them, I mean, it's better than losing to literally anybody else. So it's not like a blessing in disguise, but like the sky isn't falling. The team is still, like we said, they're a very good team, and they have places to learn and to get better. But obviously, every team has that at this point. We've certainly learned a lot about Michigan State and how dominant they can be when the moment arises against. All right, they probably came into the same weekend saying we need to establish here that we're better than Minnesota. And I think they did it, at least conference wise, because it looks like the conference almost just went to Michigan State at that point. But there's still a chance for the Gophers to be obviously a top seeded team in the national tournament. And so that's to kind of calm the waters on, while there are things to nitpick about Minnesota's games at times, they've still put themselves in an excellent position come tournament time. So we've learned a lot about Minnesota, but they still are third in the pairwise, because a lot of teams in that same echelon, they continue to lose as well at various times. So like what do we see here? Denver lost to
UMD.
Yeah, and it's like
this is
UConn threatening, and Maine loses every once in a while. Western still looks very good, but it's like there's a lot of different things going on around the Gophers that this team can still make a lot of noise if they figure some of the little stuff out against the top teams in the country.
Yeah, glass. Ooh, I can talk. Glass half empty. This is the weekend that the Gophers lost the Big Ten. You took 2 out of 12 points against Michigan State. That is going to be barring something crazy happening. Which, look, it's college hockey. Crazy stuff happens all the time. We know this all too well. But the Gophers are going to be opening the Big Ten playoffs at home versus somebody, let's say Notre Dame or Penn State or somebody on that end. Glass half full, they still are a top 5 team. They still look like they could be a number one seed. North Dakota essentially needs to win the NCHC conference tournament to get into the tournament at this point. So you expect the Gophers to be in a Fargo and have a great opportunity there. And they've still shown that they can beat the teams. I mean, Michigan State, as much as we've also been pumping and giving credit to the Spartans this weekend, which they certainly deserve, they just came off 2 weekends where they were struggled at times against Wisconsin and Michigan.
Yep.
So
left points on the table for sure.
Left points on the table. So I mean, I think they lost. They lost to Wisconsin. They lost to Michigan. They've certainly shown that at times it's tough to win on the road in the Big Ten. But at the same time, look, no team is perfect unless you're the 2012-13 Gopher women. That's the only no one else is perfect. And I covered that team, and I've seen what perfection does to people. Honestly, that was the most relief I've ever seen anyone is Rachel Ramsey after Minnesota's streak ended. It was something that just it kept building and building and building, and it is certainly something to witness. So all these teams are, especially at the top, they're very good teams. But college hockey, it's very tough to win, and it's very tough to be consistent. If anything, with the Gophers, you're seeing teams figure out and be able to exploit, especially at the top end, their weaknesses. And we haven't seen anyone take away Minnesota's depth when the Gophers have had that depth, like the Spartans did this weekend. And that is something that between that and again, the defense and goaltending, if the Gophers get those 3 things going, they are, to me, they are the top team in the nation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's like both these teams have been ranked number one at various times in this season alone. So it certainly is this podcast is certainly in a micro analysis on one series and kind of really trying to identify what the Gophers need to do better, frankly, to make hay in the tournament, in the national tournament, that is. So break pumping on a lot of the negativity maybe surrounding some of the things that they didn't do well this weekend, but there's still games to play. They're still in a very good position come tournament time. But yeah, obviously to put a bow on this, Nate, definitely a letdown after certainly Minnesota wanted to come in at full strength against Michigan State. So moving on to more around the conference, as we were talking a little bit, it's very tough to win in the Big Ten against kind of the infighting of the conference. It leads to a lot of teams beating up on each other all the time, and that was definitely the case this weekend. Wisconsin beat Michigan 5-4 Friday and then lost in a shootout 5-4 on Saturday. A lot of scoring in that game. That is to precede this next game. Penn State beat Ohio State 7-6 in the shootout Friday, then won an OT 3-2 on Saturday. Notre Dame did not play the conference game, but they split with Lindenwood. Lindenwood beat them Friday 3-2, and Notre Dame came storming back. The Notre Dame Fighting Saturdays came back and won 4-2 on Saturday. But Nate, certainly a interesting weekend around the conference. Obviously, Penn State taking it to Ohio State. Wisconsin continuing its surge in the second half after looking pretty mediocre, to put it nicely, in the first half. So again, a bunch of, we'll talk about it in just a little bit about Wisconsin, but it's almost any given weekend to steal from the most popular sport in America. But any given weekend in the Big Ten, there could be a lot of different results going around.
Oh, if you get 6 points in a weekend at this point in the year in the Big Ten, like, take it and run, and you played fantastic. For me, we'll get into Wisconsin in a little bit, but Penn State, this was a weekend that the Nittany Lions needed to show up. They needed to show that they could find a way to win. We've kind of seen a little bit bits and pieces over the last few weeks where you're wondering, are they able to kind of put something together for a weekend? And Ohio State's the perfect opponent for Penn State to do so, where they're tough. They have shown that they're able to win, but to be able to do it at home and away from Columbus, where I think the Gophers win against Ohio State's the only time that the Buckeyes have lost at home this season. So you get that home crowd and you're able to kind of show things, especially at this time of year. Like, it's almost put up or shut up time for Penn State. Mm-hmm. And they did it. They came back. They won. They got the shootout win. They got the points there. They got the OT win. It's almost bigger for them in the pairwise picture and bigger for them in the confidence than it is in the Big Ten standing. Ohio State took 2 points and it certainly doesn't feel like that, but they'll take that any day in they're kind of battling in that middle of the pack to get that last home ice spot.
Yeah, it is certainly interesting in the conference, in that even conference tournament time, there could be some interesting developments for just what teams are kind of fighting to get that other spot, especially when the pairwise is going to be pretty interesting down the stretch. And Nate, speaking of pairwise, we can certainly talk about it, and I think we need to talk about it with our next opponent, with the Gophers' next opponent in the border battle coming this weekend at Mariucci Arena. Like I mentioned in the notes, Nate, I think this series is going to look a little different this time around. Wisconsin's really improved. The Badgers are 11, 12, and 3, but guess where they sit in the pairwise, folks? 16th. They're 11, 12, and 3, and just their second half surge, and even before the start of the second half, but they're 9, 4, and 2 in their last 15 games. And
15, since the last time the two teams played.
Exactly. So it just shows that the Big Ten, and especially Mike Hastings' team, has gotten a lot better, recaptured that identity that he'd like them to have, and it's going to be a really tough out for the Gophers, considering how much of a surge this Wisconsin team has had. And obviously, like we mentioned last weekend, beat Michigan 5-4 Friday, but lost in the shootout. So I guess essentially really tied on Saturday. But again, that's against Michigan, like we talked about earlier. Michigan is just such a crapshoot most of the time. Like they'll beat a really good team, and then they'll lose to they'll get shut out against a team that can't even field a full roster in a series. Considering Minnesota is as an example. So, what do you think about this upcoming this upcoming border battle for Mariucci with a lot of pretty high stakes one, I think, from just a conference standpoint, and now finally Wisconsin again is back competitive again this year to help really renew that Wisconsin rivalry that really fell to the wayside for a number of years.
It speaks to the Big Ten that Wisconsin's 16th in the pairwise. It also helps that Wisconsin is 2-6-3 in overtime. So many of those games, are just the lose in overtime, which count less in the pairwise. Including Minnesota beating them in regulation in Madison in November. They only have 2 regulation losses. The only 2 teams that beat them in regulation are Michigan State and Minnesota. So, I mean, if you're going to lose to 2 teams in the top 3 in the pairwise to do so.
Yep.
And they're playing. I mean, they had the loss to Lindenwood as well, and they struggled, but like they got swept by Denver, and they're playing in the Big Ten, who certainly held their own. Where it says it because you don't see too often a sub 500 team that high in the pairwise. It's very tough. I think the Badgers were the Badgers are the last time that a sub 500 team made the NCAA tournament. They're going to be the last time because they changed the rules after that. But if you're looking at the Big Ten, looking at 4 or 5 teams in the conference tournament, in the NCAA tournament, it's that tough of a conference. I mean, we just talked about Penn State. Penn State's 24th in the pairwise. You have 6 teams in the top 24 out of 7. That's not an easy task.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, and for me, Wisconsin right now in that Michigan series, they looked a lot like the dangerous Wisconsin team from last year. We kind of saw these pieces where just at the beginning of the year, the Badgers, they couldn't score a goal to save their lives. They were essentially one line. If they could get the 3, which was not going to happen at all, they'd be fine. Their goalies were struggling, and it's kind of, Mike Hastings played the long game, and he's slowly putting things together. I still think you're seeing a little bit of the talent gap between the Badgers and some of the top teams, but they're getting a little bit more scoring. They're utilizing their depth a little more. Goalies are more dialed in. It's a tougher out, and as much as I think we were really disappointed at how Minnesota played against Wisconsin and Madison, took away, and kind of hindsight being 2020, that doesn't really look disappointing at all anymore.
Certainly not. And to kind of talk a little bit about what we're looking for from Minnesota this weekend against Wisconsin, Nate, what do you think? I mean, I'm not going to I don't want to put do we need 6 points level on it, because that could be just, that's just clickbait for every single week. Like, oh, do they need 6 points this week? Like they needed it last week. But I just think,
the answer is always yes, by the way. Yes, exactly. They do 6 points. Yes.
Exactly.
They're never well, you know what? The Gophers can lose a shootout. They'll just go and end 2-0. They can't score on it. We know it. No one's ever yeah, that's fine. No.
Exactly.
They always want 6 points.
Exactly. They always want 6 points, but do they at this point, the conference seems to, like you mentioned, have been pretty much won by Michigan State. And I just think I'm looking for the Gophers to reestablish that identity and to make sure that they can look improved on the power play, improved on the penalty kill, win some more faceoffs, and just when they get hemmed in their own zone, to find ways to get out of it. Just to see a bit more complete game all around in two games, really. I'd love to see just that they rebound from the Michigan State series this past weekend and kind of reestablish themselves and just kind of find ways to showcase all the talent and structure that they showed all year that in ways that they can be successful. So, Nate, what do you think what are you looking for from Minnesota this weekend against the Badgers?
I want to see how they respond. It's not going to be an easy. It's not going to be an easy way. Maybe they'll have one great period out of the 6, which is, I can see that for Minnesota, where maybe they put up 4 or 5 goals in a period. But just playing Wisconsin, playing a defensively structured and sound team, that's going to make them earn their opportunities when things don't go right for the Gophers. And we've seen this over the last 3 weeks. I want to see Minnesota respond the way that we've seen that the Gophers respond for much of the season.
Yep.
You want to see some match Wisconsin's defensive goaltending. Want to see what happens if someone can get if one of the goalies can get to both games. And also see what Bob does with the lines after this weekend. If it's still kind of spread out, see who gets those opportunities. If he's trying to get maybe a few more players going. If he can get more of that, I mean, if you can get a little bit more of those, like if you get like Jimmy Clark, if you can get Matthew Wood, just somebody getting a little bit more to kind of complement the scoring. Because when Minnesota's depth is firing, the Gophers are tough. But as much as Jimmy Snuggerud continues to be Jimmy Snuggerud, he's not he can't do it on his own. And it's honestly it's kind of sometimes it feels like this late January, February is a flip from last year where you're like, where's Jimmy Snuggerud? Yeah, it's kind of like they might be getting more while everyone else is contributing. Now it's the opposite of, because I think he had a stretch of like a month and a half where like he didn't score.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now it's like, well, Jimmy Snuggerud's going to be good for 2 goals a game. Who can get that 3rd and 4th to put Minnesota ahead to win 4-2 or whatever.
Exactly. It's going to be interesting to see what they can do this weekend. Rely on the depth and have it shine once more. But Nate, I think that'll do it for us. I do want to talk about a little bit before, a little selfishly. I want to talk. The hockey day was fun. I was out there.
I was gonna say, because if you're about to leave before this, I'm like, no, Drew, I want to learn more about your hockey day experience.
No, it was fun. I was only there on Friday, so the day before hockey day, but they were doing a lot of different. They were playing games from Wednesday to Saturday, and it was very intriguing. But very cold Friday night. I certainly did not wear the proper socks for it, but that's okay. It's everything's still all right. But it was a fun game. Yeah, the Gophers played an alumni game against a bunch of collegiate all-stars was the other team, or not collegiate, just collegiate alumni was the other game. The Gophers had players all the way from 1992 to 2019. There was only 1 year not represented in that. It was 14-15. But I got I was there for Minnesota Hockey Magazine and got actually a pretty fun feature. It was a very interesting game to cover, considering it's like, all right, it's a game that doesn't matter for anything. And the players certainly didn't take it super seriously. It was kind of just a let's relive the glory days kind of thing. But that'll be coming out. I'm not sure exactly when the next hockey magazine is going to be published, but it's kind of got it's going to have everything from hockey day. It's just a big hockey day post recap type issue. So I highly recommend you find that and read it. Because I'm going to have a fun feature in that alumni game, fun feature on the Gophers that'll be coming up in that as well.
Did you get to talk to Ken Patterson?
I did not. I missed him at the end. I talked to Paul Martin, but I missed Ken Patterson, one of my middle school heroes, really, just from watching the Gophers when I was when he was playing there. Those were some fun teams to watch when he was the starter. So it was a very interesting weekend, very fun game. It was really cool to see. Even like the biggest thing I loved, all the different buckets that all the guys had, the helmets that everyone was rocking. There was like such an eclectic mix. A lot of guys wearing their college helmets, but a few guys wearing pro, a few guys wearing just a bunch of different helmets. It looked like Brian Bonnin had his original Gophers helmet.
That's my guy. See, that's my guy.
Like his helmet.
Like Patterson. I got Brian Bonnin.
There you go. Because it was, and he looked really good. I mean, he was. I think he was the oldest guy on the ice, but he looked real good, competing with a bunch of guys who, as of last season, there was a bunch of NHL. I mean, on the other side of it, I mean, Zach Parise, Jake Gardner, like those guys were literally in the NHL in the last few years, and it's it kind of showed. It ended up as a win for the other team, but it looked like it was a bunch of fun for everybody involved, and it was kind of a cool experience sitting there. And I was between the glass with a friend of ours, Jupe from GPL, was there.
That's always good. I'm glad. I listened to their show last week, and he was like trying to get in there, and I was like, I'm like, I hope he did, because I listened to it on Friday.
Yep. No, he did.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, he made it in, and we kind of all hung out a little bit. We were all between the benches, which was kind of a fun experience to kind of take in the game from that perspective. So I highly recommend picking up or finding the Minnesota Hockey Magazine online, on social media, anywhere you can get it. I'm not sure exactly when the issue is coming out, but I'll certainly be retweeting it, reposting wherever it goes. So highly recommend reading that.
We'll link in the notes whenever it comes out.
Exactly. So, but now I think that does it for us. The plugs and the fun surrounding Hockey Day aside, I think that does it for us this week. We'll be back next week after the Wisconsin series. But for Nate Wells, I'm Drew Cove. Thanks again to everybody for listening. And until next time, we'll see you at the rink.